My people, this is the story of a king who, despite marrying over 100 wives, still cannot bear a child. So how is it that suddenly all of the wives that he banished for being barren suddenly became pregnant? Please come and join me in listening to this story.
In the heart of medieval Igbo land, the kingdom of Kaka was ruled by King Mbanu. Despite his wealth, power, and numerous wives, the king had no children to inherit his throne. His despair grew with each passing day, and he began to marry every marriageable virgin in the kingdom, convinced that the fault lay with his wives. King Mbanu decreed that every family with a marriageable daughter must bring her to him. The villagers, fearful of the king's wrath, complied. Every 2 days, the king took a new wife, hoping for a child. But his hopes were in vain. Not a single wife bore him a child. Each marriage was marked by grand ceremonies with music, dance, and feasting. The villagers participated, though their hearts were heavy, knowing the fate that awaited the young brides. The king, desperate and relentless, continued his quest for an heir. The king's harem grew with each passing week. The palace was filled with young wives, each hoping to be the one to bear the king's child. But as time passed, hope turned to despair, and the king's frustration grew. Frustrated and angry, King Mbanu began to banish his wives to the outskirts of the village, declaring them cursed. The banished wives lived in isolation, away from the village, marked by the king's disdain. Their lives became a daily struggle for survival. The villagers watched in sorrow as their daughters were taken to the palace only to be banished later. The once joyful community was now shrouded in fear and sadness, knowing that their daughter's fate lay in the hands of the king. Every 2 days, the cycle continued. The king took a new wife, consummated the marriage, and awaited the news of a pregnancy that never came. His anger and frustration knew no bounds, and his treatment of the banished wives grew harsher. The banished wives, now numbering in dozens, formed a small community on the outskirts. They supported each other, sharing their sorrows and finding solace in their shared plights. Despite their circumstances, they held on to hope and resilience. King Mbanu's desperation reached a new height. He doubled his efforts, marrying more frequently and pushing the boundaries of his decree. The palace was filled with tension as the king's temper grew shorter with each passing day. The king's relentless pursuit of an heir led to his breaking point. In a fit of rage, he declared that any woman who failed to bear him a child would be considered cursed and banished. This decree solidified his belief that the fault lay with the women, not himself. One fateful day, news reached the king that the neighboring village of Kadu planned to invade Kaka. The king, desperate to protect the core of his village, He ignored the outskirts where his banished wives lived. As the warriors of Kadu advanced, they ravaged the huts, stole food, and raped the women. The warriors of Kaka fought fiercely and barely managed to defeat the invaders from Kadu. The village was left to recover from their losses. But peace was short-lived as new troubles emerged. Months after the invasion, news reached King Mbanu that his banished wives had become pregnant. Confused and suspicious, the king investigated and learned the horrifying truth. His wives had been impregnated by the warriors of Kadu during the invasion. The king realized the painful truth. It was not his wives who were barren, but he who was unable to father children. This revelation shattered him, forcing him to confront his own flaws and pride. King Mbanu summoned spiritual leaders from across the land to find out what was wrong with him. They performed mystical rituals, seeking answers from the gods. During one of such rituals, a revelation emerged. The king, Mbanu, had been cursed by a spirit he had wronged in his youth. As the young prince, Mbanu had desecrated a sacred grave, angering a powerful forest spirit. The spirit cursed him to be barren until he sought forgiveness. The king was instructed to perform a series of difficult tasks to atone for his past misdeed. These tasks tested his strength, humility, and resolve. King Mbanu embarked on a journey guided by the spiritual leaders to complete the tasks. Along the way, he encountered mystical creatures. Each task was a challenge that pushed the king to his limits. From retrieving a sacred artifact to making peace with a neighboring tribe, King Mbanu's journey was fraught with danger and revelation. The final task required the king to confront the spirit he had wronged. This encounter was the ultimate test of his character, forcing him to acknowledge his past mistakes and seek forgiveness. The spirit, moved by the king's genuine remorse, lifted the curse. King Mbanu was finally free from his past, and the path to fatherhood was opened up. King Mbanu returned to Kaka, a changed man. He sought out his banished wives and asked for their forgiveness, promising to make amends. They were allowed to return to the village, and he treated them with respect and care. While the king's banished wives were now treated well, it was his latest wife, the last he married before the curse was lifted, who bore him a son. This child, a prince, became the heir to the throne. In time, the king's latest wife gave birth to more children. The kingdom rejoiced, and King Mbanu's lineage was secured. The prince grew up strong and wise, destined to be a good leader. King Mbanu learned a profound lesson. True leadership requires humility, compassion, and the courage to face one's own flaw. He ruled with profound wisdom, earning the respect and love of his people. The story of King Mbanu became a legend in Igbo land, a tale of redemption and the power of humility. His legacy lived on through his son, who inherited a kingdom united and strong.